welcome to Mentality Meets. So Rob, can you just give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are? And while you're doing that, can everyone, if you can, on your chat bar, just answer these quick questions. So question number one, what is your name? Now, statistics tell us that 1 in 4 adults are experiencing signs and symptoms of mental health illnesses at some point during the course of the year, but it will also tell us that 9 in 10 of us are being impacted by mental health, which is where we are either experiencing mental health illnesses for ourselves or whether we are supporting someone directly or indirectly. Now, I'd quite like to put this to the test on this chat bar today. So what is your name? And would you say that you have been impacted over the last few months by mental health, whether that's for yourself or whether that's for a friend or a family member or somebody else who is close to you? So while those bits are coming back onto the chat bar, Rob, who are you? What is your kind of personal story? And yeah, just introduce us to who you are.
Cool, thanks Peter, and afternoon everybody. So I'm Rob Stephenson. I'm a full-time campaigner and I'm on a mission of helping inspire the creation of mentally healthier workplaces and societies. And this mission is personal to me. I experience bipolar disorder, which is a mental illness characterized by extremes of mood, from pretty deep, dark depression at times where I cannot get out of bed, do my job, look after my children, through to periods of mania where I can take risks and make pretty bad decisions. But I use the words experience as opposed to suffer. At times I do suffer, but I do experience periods of drive, creativity, and ability to challenge the status quo. And I think it's important that we recognize the strengths in our mental health challenges as well. So I'm 48. I was diagnosed with this condition when I was 30. I see the signs going back through my 20s and to my late teens. And when I was diagnosed, I kind of thought I could be fixed by the medical profession, which for a while I was. And then the depression came back. And it came back with a loss of hope and a sense of futility. And my story got a little bit dark for a while then. But then over the next 15 years, with the love of close friends and family around me, I learned to manage my condition with medication and therapy, but also with prioritization of sleep and exercise and social connections, the proactive things we can do to stay well. And that took me on till 2017, when mental health, and Peter, you'll be very aware of this, sort of exploded in the UK with the princes speaking out and a lot of workplaces looking to kind of end the stigma. And I thought, you know, why am I hiding my condition? Why do I put physiotherapy in my diary every time I go and see my therapist when I've got a team that I love and respect? My team must have thought I have the worst physio in the world, but it didn't make sense. And I decided to share my story, which I did in a pretty awkward Facebook post. But the reaction to that post really changed my life, because not only did I get an inpouring of people checking in and seeing if I was okay and you know, empathy and sympathy, what I was also getting was a real awareness of how many people experience a mental health challenge, but do so in silence because of the stigma. It was friends, it was even family members, business contacts. And so that really motivated me to change direction. And I founded something called Inside Out, which is a social enterprise. And what we do there is we publish an annual list of senior business leaders who are open about the fact that they have a mental health challenge. And really with a view to kind of smashing the stigma by saying it's okay to talk about your mental health challenges, and you can still attain a position of leadership. So that's called the Inside Out Leaderboard. We've been running that for a couple of years now. We've had over 110 role models in the UK put their names to it, and we're building that year on year. And then along the way, as a campaigner and speaker, I started sharing something called the Form Score. So behind me, you can see my background. I'm a 6 out of 10 today. This is a tool that has been given to me by a therapist years ago, just to track my mood, track my mental health. And I've been doing that successfully and helping me manage my condition for years. Last year, I started publishing that on my LinkedIn profile, on my email signature. And it's been getting some really interesting reactions, with a lot of people now and businesses using this Form Score methodology of just giving yourself a number out of 10 every day and sharing that with friends, with colleagues, as a different language to check in on proactively what is our mental well-being today. So as I say, I'm a 6 out of 10, which is average form. As I was saying before we started, Peter, I have experienced the coronavirus itself, which has impacted my ability to exercise, even though I'm supposedly recovered from it now. Normally I'd be off riding my bike 3 or 4 times a week, and I'm just not able to do that physically, which is super frustrating, which is meaning my score is probably a couple of points lower than it would normally be. So yeah, I could go on, but that's a brief intro to a couple of things that I do.
Mate, that's absolutely brilliant. So thank you. And so just kind of coming back to the chat bar. So Pete, welcome. Yes, definitely had an experience kind of through work life and the people that you're working with. Uni says not directly, but certainly aware of other people through secondhand information, through stories that people are sharing. Helen is saying possibly due to working at home and not being around other people. And I think kind of, Helen, that is something which I've heard again and again and again, especially when people are kind of people person, you know what I mean? Where you actually get energy from being around other people and the whole isolation process and kind of being in your own space. And Chandy, personal experience, and know others who have as well. So it is definitely, I mean, I find it, like you said, back in 2017 and the Royals kind of getting involved and government getting involved and Theresa May making a pledge that every school will have access to a mental health first aider because of the sudden realization of the impact that mental health is having and how the conversation has shifted and moved. And it's quite difficult now not to be aware of mental health, but I think it's fascinating that people who may be struggling, possibly for the first time, and I think this pandemic has created an environment where more people are experiencing signs and symptoms of their mental health, I'm not going to say mental health illnesses, than ever before, but I still think people are struggling to talk about it. And so a question that I have kind of coming back to you, Rob, around this form score is how can we as a group of individuals kind of listening in today help people talk about it more through the use of this form score?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks everyone for sharing on the chat there. It's you know, I would say that all of us have mental health. It's about being human, good and bad mental health. And I'd say all of us will have our mental health challenged by the pandemic, whether it's isolation or anxiety or just not being able to go and watch your favorite football team or do the things that you normally would do. This will impact our mental well-being. But I think mental health has a bit of a brand problem, and it has a brand problem in that you say the words mental health and people think of head in the hands, illness, people with anxiety, people with depression. And if you contrast that to physical health, people would think of vibrancy and fitness and people that are well. And so one of the issues that we have is you say mental health, people think of illness, and they think generally, unless you're one of those unlucky people with a mental illness, then it doesn't apply to me. And a lot of people will think that mental health, that's not for me, I'm not interested, I'm all right. And actually mental health applies to everybody. But if we can accept that, we can then accept that we can influence it by proactively managing our mental well-being. And so for me, the form score, it's in a way giving a new language and a very simple one in that we're using the word form to talk about how we are, about our mental health. We're using the number out of 10 to say how we're feeling in a really easy way of communicating. And that what I'm finding is it's a lot easier for people to say, hey, I'm a 5 today, I've got poor form, I didn't sleep very well, or I'm a bit worried about the future, than it is saying those words itself. So it's just a really simple tool that enables people to connect with a shared language and one that's not threatening because it's not talking about mental health or mental illness. And we're building it into an app that would allow, if me and you are connected, we'd see our form scores each day. So you track your own, but then you connect with others on it. And that would then enable you to, reach out. If you saw me drop to a 4, you'd be able to say, hey, what's going on? Do you want to have a chat? So trying to facilitate a new means of communication, but B, facilitate that peer support that, we can all do that. We can all be there for a friend who's struggling, right?
I think that's a fascinating insight. And what I love about that context is that actually it's encouraging people to connect. And I love the idea that actually as people who are connected through the app, who know each other, would be able to say, hey, Rob, mate, you fancy a coffee today? Because I've just seen what your score is and just wanted to check in. And just that kind of connection. And I mean, going out for a coffee or even just sitting and having a coffee over Zoom, but actually connecting with someone, you know?
Yeah, it's been
That,
really interesting because I've been testing it with a, and I've got about 20 people I'm connected with on the test app, and you start to then understand the rhythms of people and their form. So some people might be a steady 6, and that's normal for them, but you see that. But some people might be generally a 7 or an 8, and they drop to a 6, and there might be a bit of an issue, and then to start reaching out. Whereas normally we only find out how people are doing if we say, "How are you?" And actually, because of the stigma of mental ill health, people say, "I'm good, I'm fine, I'm okay." It's a bit of a ritual, a bit of a greeting, and we don't answer it honestly. So it's a really interesting soft way of checking in with people and knowing when people might need that reach out call.
I love that, because I think it could even go either way. That person who's kind of the regular 6, even if they suddenly popped up to a 7, it might be just enough to make you go, "Oh, hang on." So it doesn't necessarily even have to go down, but I really like that kind of connecting process. So you know what, everyone, let's do it. Scale of 1 to 10, kind of mental form. So what would you kind of say you are today? I would say that for me personally, I find the mornings much harder, Rob. I've realized I am definitely not a morning person. So literally for the first hour or so, I would be kind of scraping through, for me, which is probably for around a kind of 5 or 6. And weirdly, because my job is to kind of be the presenter and be up front, I find that as soon as I kind of switch into that, everything kind of just builds up. I get a lot of energy from kind of the engagement and the training process. But yeah, mornings, I've really started to realize I need to think about how I work my mornings to become more effective a little bit quicker. Do you find any specific times?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point there, and which is one of self-awareness, though, and so I think that knowing that you're on lower form in the mornings, that's probably quite useful in how you structure your day. Yeah, so for me, I'm the reverse. I'm absolutely rubbish beyond 7 p.m. And I'm definitely a morning person. But I think for me, it's then working out kind of what are the drivers of form. So there's a bunch of questions I ask to get to that sort of number out of 10: sleep, exercise, social connections, stress management, sense of purpose, a whole bunch of things like that. And they'll have more weight for one person versus the next. So I know for me, generally, if I can get some exercise in first thing, that will set me up for a good form that day, which is again why my form is depressed. Somebody else might need to find those breaks in the day, those moments of stress management and recovery from the constant Zoom calls we're having and the constant way of working, whatever it might be. Others might need to find doing good. I saw a comment there from Peter that helping others gives you a boost in your own form. And that's why a lot of people get a lot of well-being benefits from doing charity work and giving back. So it's for me, it's the reflection on what's driving your form and then building the self-awareness of how to manage it proactively. Because the best people at managing their mental health are the people that have got an illness, right? Because we've gone through that self-awareness. Whereas if you've never really had a need to work out what works for you, then you can kind of bumble along at a 5 or a 6, but actually you might be a 7 or an 8 if you bring some exercise into your life or work on your connections a bit. So self-awareness, I think, is a big gift of all of this.
I think that's also quite fascinating, because I was talking to someone quite early on in the lockdown who has had repeated episodes of mental health illnesses and really struggling with that. And I said, but does that mean that you are almost like a step ahead of everyone else because you know what you now need to do to help you get back in a quicker kind of process, whereas a lot of people are suddenly experiencing this for the first time and struggling? I said, does that mean that you are, and I can't remember the word, that you're, I almost had the word, but just that kind of like extra step ahead. Are you in that benefited place? And
it's the gift of self-awareness, So you talk to Alistair Campbell, and love him or hate him, I know Alistair reasonably well. He's a great campaigner on mental health. And he talks about if you're interviewing a candidate for a job and you've got two identical CVs, but one had got a gap in their CV recovering from a mental health challenge, which one would you hire? And he would always pick the one with who's recovering from the challenge, because that person has been through the ringer a little bit, has worked out how to overcome that challenge, and has got the tools in their locker that when things like a global pandemic come along, they're more equipped to deal with it. So I think that process of gaining that knowledge of self is really powerful. But I don't think we need to have a crisis with our mental health to do that. We just need to be motivated. And the real motivation of it is, and the real benefit is, actually we can be happier, more productive, higher performing if we invest in our mental well-being the same way we invest in our physical well-being. A lot of us know we need to kind of exercise and get out and go to the gym for physical health reasons. We don't really work on our, and I hate the word mental fitness, but we don't work on our mental health in the same way.
And another kind of thought process, kind of, because I literally just kind of set out, okay, audience, what do you reckon, kind of 1 to 10, and we got kind of a little bit. So Pete's saying it can get a bit addictive, finding something positive to say to other people, to kind of better yourself. So about 8 to 9. Shandy says 7. Pete then recommended that I leave childcare to someone else to help me boost up in the morning. I like that idea. Helen's gone for a 7.5. And Pete's going, lots of people I work with have suddenly found that the rest of the world has now got some insight into anxiety that they have been feeling for years. And it feels a little bit more mainstream. It's kind of the phrasing on the chat. But I mean, having kind of thrown out to the audience a scale of 1 to 10, with the form score, do you have a more of a structure of kind of how to help people kind of score themselves and things to look out for and engage with at all?
Yeah. And first of all, I mean, I don't over-prescribe it, but I think one thing to note is that it is quite important, if you're going to compare against other people and have that common language, is defining what the scale means. So a 10 can mean very different things to different people. So for me, a 10 is peak form that you might attain kind of once or twice in your life if the stars align. 9 is exceptional form. 8 is very good. 7 is good form. 6 is average. And then I go kind of 5 is poor, very poor. And then 3, 2, and 1, you kind of struggling, need help, seek help now. And then 1 would be crisis, seek help immediately. And so what I've done is define that scale, and then people have started to adapt to the scale itself. And I think if you are communicating on a 7 today, you kind of want that commonality of what does a 7 mean. And so until you define the scale, you can't really do that. The second thing is kind of what is driving your form, what is driving your mental health. And I've defined a number of drivers in the 10 questions I've got. It's not exhaustive, but it covers sleep, exercise, social connection, a bunch of things that I mentioned there, stress management, loosely based on the 5 ways to well-being, plus a couple of the questions that would indicate elements of kind of depression kicking in. But it's not a diagnostic tool, and it's not meant to be. It's meant to be kind of how is my well-being today, how is my mental health today, for everybody, not just people that might be struggling. So I think if we define the questions and define the scale, then you've got commonality of language. But what we kind of want is not for people to be over subscribing to kind of the detail. It's to wake up and think, okay, how am I doing today? And just take a moment to notice what their score might be and think, yeah, well, I didn't sleep that well, but I'm feeling pretty motivated. I'm actually quite connected with my family, probably need to exercise. That probably averages a 7 today. And you get a feel for what you are, because then it becomes easy. And there's some great tracking tools out there. There's lots of mood trackers, but my concern is that the utilization drops off after a period of time because people get fatigue in answering a big questionnaire.
Yeah. Whereas
a number out of 10, we can do that each day, but it gives us a way of A, tracking, and B, communicating.
So another kind of question on the, I'm aware that kind of we're focusing on this form app, but with the app, is it something that I and my team can all access and we can link together? Is it something that, let's say, me and even to my community, how would you recommend we try and use this in the
Yeah.
context of starting conversations with those around us?
Yeah, so the initial release will be for individuals, and it will be free for individuals, and you can then choose who you connect with. So I wouldn't see it like Facebook where you've got hundreds of contacts on there. You might have 8 or 10 people that you want to be tracking, maybe a few more, and you both give consent to see each other's score, and then you track. So I've seen the methodology used really well in a team scenario. I've seen it used in a family group, and I've seen it used in a friend group. So I think people will choose who they want in their kind of circles of trust, and you only see the form of people that connect with you. I think as we evolve it, there'll be a kind of workplace offering, and I could also see it useful for children going off to university as a way of their parents just keeping track on how they're doing without the need to ask, right?
Yeah.
But the initial version, which will be out in a couple of weeks, you just choose who you invite, and they give consent, and then you see their scores each day.
So another question which I wanted to ask around the encouraging leaders to be talking more about mental health and more about just kind of raising the awareness, especially within the workplace. If we work in a company, how do we encourage our senior managers to begin to engage more with the conversation around mental health as a whole for the organization, but also about sharing their own mental health journey? Because there's loads of research that kind of shows that when the top leaders begin to share about their mental health journey, it creates a dynamic within the organization that it seems to be okay. And more people then start to cascade that conversation. Is there any words of wisdom or insight that you can give us around how we encourage our most senior leaders to reach out?
So I think there's a few points there. I mean, one, anyone that shares their story is a role model and contributes to smashing the stigma and normalizing the conversation, whatever level they are. When a leader shares their story, as you say, that accelerates the process of culture change, that helps people feel that they have permission to say, hey, I'm struggling too. And I've got a number of case studies from the leaderboard where I've seen that happen to really good effect, where that's positively impacted people's lives. So how do we encourage more of that? I think, firstly, it's still a very personal issue. So I think we can't pressurize people to share their stories where they've been hiding it for years and they're not yet ready to do so. But I think if you are a leader of a business and you are not treating the mental health and well-being of employees as a strategic priority, I think you have to question if you are truly fit to be a leader right now, because mental health and well-being is one of the things that is getting tested the most as a result of the pandemic, and the psychological safety of people returning to the workplace, all of these issues. And the best organizations, their leaders, whether they're sharing stories or not, are getting behind this and investing time and resource in looking after the mental health and well-being of employees. I think the best way of encouraging leaders to share their stories, and the way that I do it, is just showcase those that have already done it, and showcase what happens to that organization when you've got a leader that is behind the agenda. So a lot of my leaders become advocates and will do talks and talk about their experience, their journey. And the encouraging thing we're seeing on the leaderboard is over time, gradually, we're getting more and more leaders say, hey, I've seen what's happening on the leaderboard. I experienced this particular challenge and I'd like to come and share my story. And so there's definitely momentum there. But I think you've got to respect that, everybody's story is their own, and it's a personal thing, and it needs to be the right time for people to feel comfortable in sharing it. But I think what we need to do is highlight the positive impact when people do.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Rob. I've just got a quick glimpse of the time, and it's already 3:26. We've got literally 4 minutes left of this chat. I don't quite know what's happened there or where it's gone. And so I just want to come back to you, Rob, and just ask, for the audience that we have here today, is there any kind of words of encouragement or, if you like, a call to action that you would like to just encourage people to be engaging with and be kind of pushing out there? I don't know. Any last words?
Yeah, so I think the group on the call today, and thank you for this, all of you, are a wonderful open group of humans who, just from the comments in the chat there, are being very open about their own experiences and have shared their scores, and that's great. I mean, I think for people watching back, generally, my advice is, look, we all have mental health. It's one of the great opportunities to boost our performance, to boost our happiness if we focus on it. And a very, very easy way of doing that is just thinking, hey, how am I today? Look at that form score idea and give a number out of 10, but check in with others and be prepared to have that conversation. Ask, how are you today? And be prepared to have a conversation if someone says, actually, I'm struggling a little bit. Don't be afraid of having that conversation, because we don't need to diagnose. We're not capable of doing that, but we can be humans and listen. And the analogy I always make is, if someone said to you, I'm struggling, I've just been diagnosed with cancer, what you wouldn't say is, oh, well, I'm not really sure of what course of chemotherapy to recommend to you. What you would say is, that's rubbish. What do you need right now? I'm really sorry to hear that. I'm here for you. But because of the stigma, we don't do that with our mental health and mental health challenges. And my big one is, look, let's be human. Let's be a little bit more human. We all struggle. We all struggle right now because of the pandemic. So let's just reach out and ask that question, how are you today?
Well, thank you so much for that as a kind of conclusion to this session. It's been such an insight to kind of just hear how our form changes. Kind of, we all know that we have good days and bad days, but actually being able to track it, being able to support people and other things like that. And so to anyone who is on this call and anyone who is listening back to it in the future, reach out. We all know someone who may be struggling. Don't be afraid to reach out. Give them a call. Just jump in. But actually, also, if you need someone to talk to, don't be afraid to reach out. Engage with the people around you. I often kind of say, out of all the people you know of in your world, how many people would you be able to have that deeper, more emotionally charged conversation with? And I'm hoping that we have one, if not two, of those people that we can reach out to if we need to. But guys, we are here at 3:29 and probably seconds, which means that it is the end of our Mentality Meets. So I have been Peter Larkum. This has been Rob Stephenson. You guys have been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care. God bless. And bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
So that's our official ending in the context of Mentality Meets. Rob, thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom on that. I hope that was helpful and engaging for you. How did you find it for yourself?
Yeah, it was a quick 30 minutes, wasn't it? Yeah, great group on the chat, and I think when you're passionate about this topic like you and I are, then the conversation goes like that, doesn't it? We could have spoken for a lot longer. So yeah, no, lovely to talk to you. Thank you for having me, keep checking in with yourself on that form score.
Mate, thank you so much. And would love to kind of stay connected as we go on from here. So
definitely.
Bless you, buddy. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Be well.
Thanks, everyone.